At 2300 hours on 5 June 1944, 18 RAF Lancaster bombers from 617 Squadron lifted off from RAF Woodhall Spa in Lincolnshire carrying no bombs whatsoever. Instead, each aircraft held bundles of aluminium strips, window in RAF Parliament, chaff to the Americans, cut precisely to 26.7 cm in length and 2 cm in width. Over the next 6 hours, these aircraft would fly a mathematically choreographed ballet across the English Channel, each plane executing a precise oval pattern measuring 11 km long by 3 km wide, releasing window bundles at intervals of exactly 4 seconds, whilst advancing towards the French coast at a speed of precisely 13 km/h. To German radar operators staring at their Würzburg and Freya screens between Kallala and Boulogne, this looked like nothing less than a massive invasion fleet of 10,000 tons, displacement steaming steadily towards Pas-de-Calais, the closest point between England and France, the obvious place for the Allies to land, precisely where Hitler and most of the German high command expected them. In reality, 250 km to the southwest, the actual invasion fleet of 6,939 vessels was approaching the Normandy beaches. The Germans were watching ghosts. This wasn't a desperate improvisation or a lucky accident. This was Operation Glimmer, the northern component of Operation Taxable, perhaps the most mathematically elegant deception in military history. The entire plan rested on a rather unsettling piece of knowledge. German radar couldn't tell the difference between a battleship and a cloud of tin foil falling through the air at the correct speed. What looked on paper like a hopeless gambit, convincing the entire German military that an invasion fleet existed using nothing more than aluminium scrap and geometry, became the template for electronic warfare for the next 8 decades. The paradox was this: the more sophisticated German radar technology became, the more vulnerable it was to being fooled by something as simple as metallized strips fluttering in the wind. Standard military thinking in 1944 held that radar had made large-scale deception effectively impossible. The Germans had deployed an extensive chain of coastal radar stations, the Himmelbett system, stretching from Norway to the Spanish border with concentrations of Würzburg, raised giant radars providing coverage every 40 km along the French coast. Each Würzburg installation could detect surface vessels at ranges exceeding 70 km and could measure range to within 100 m. German commanders believed this electronic fence made surprise virtually impossible. General Feldmarschall Gerd von Rundstedt, Commander-in-Chief West, stated in April 1944 that the English cannot put a single vessel to sea without our knowledge. The German 15th Army, positioned at Pardala with 19 divisions, maintained constant radar watch specifically because this stretch of coast just 34 km from Dover represented the most logical invasion route. German naval planning documents from May 1944 estimated they would have at least 4 hours warning of any major fleet movement, sufficient time to position U-boat, E-boat, and coastal artillery. The technical reality seemed to support this confidence. British intelligence, through ultra-intercepts and reports from the French resistance, knew precisely how good German radar had become. The Würzburg reinstallations used a 7.5 m parabolic dish operating at 53 cm wavelength, giving them extraordinary resolution for 1944. These sets could distinguish individual ships in a convoy and estimate tonnage based on return strength. Fighter control radars could vector night fighters onto individual bomber streams with lethal accuracy. RAF bomber command losses to German night fighters had reached catastrophic levels in 1943, with 1,047 heavy bombers lost between March and July alone, before the introduction of window dramatically reduced these figures. The German radar network represented a £500 million investment in 1944, roughly equivalent to $25 billion today. Critics of deception operations argued that this technological barrier couldn't be overcome with parlor tricks. Air Chief Marshal Sir Arthur Harris famously dismissed early deception proposals as conjurers' nonsense, insisting that radar had rendered such operations obsolete. Yet British planners at the London Controlling Section and the Special Means Department of MI5 believed something different. They'd been studying a peculiar phenomenon since July 1943, when Window had first been deployed over Hamburg. The principle was embarrassingly simple. Radar works by sending out radio waves and measuring what bounces back. A metal object reflects radio waves. Thousands of metal objects properly deployed create thousands of reflections. The German operators at Hamburg had reported seeing what appeared to be hundreds of bombers where only dozens actually flew. The radar couldn't distinguish between a Lancaster and a bundle of metallized paper falling at the terminal velocity. What military theorists saw as radar's strength, its ability to detect anything metal, was simultaneously its fundamental vulnerability. The secret was in the mathematics, not the technology. Dr. Joan Curran, a physicist working at the Telecommunications Research Establishment in Malvern, had calculated the precise dimensions required for window strips to resonate at German radar frequencies back in 1942. The 26.7 cm length wasn't arbitrary. It represented exactly half the wavelength of German Würzburg radar operating at 53 cm. When radio waves of this frequency struck an aluminium strip of this precise length, the strip acted as a dipole antenna, absorbing the energy and radiating it with remarkable efficiency. A single bundle of window containing roughly 2,000 strips and weighing just 200 g produced a radar return equivalent to a bomber aircraft. Released at altitude, these bundles would separate and flutter downwards at approximately 300 meters per minute, creating a radar signature that persisted for several minutes as the strips dispersed. What actually mattered wasn't creating individual false targets. Any fool could toss metal out of an aircraft, but creating a coherent, believable pattern that would convince trained German radar operators they were watching an actual naval formation. This required solving an extraordinary geometric problem. How do you make falling aluminium strips which descend vertically at 300 m/minute appear to be ships traveling horizontally at 13 km/h? The answer came from Wing Commander Edward Dickey of 617 Squadron and scientists from the Telecommunications Research Establishment working together through April and May 1944. They devised a flight pattern where aircraft would fly precise oval racetrack patterns, releasing window continuously. Each aircraft would complete one oval every 30 minutes, with the oval advancing towards the coast at exactly 13 km/h, the speed of a heavily laden landing ship. The geometry was elegant but unforgiving. 8 aircraft flew the northern pattern, Operation Glimmer, creating the illusion of a 16 km wide convoy heading towards Ballon. Each Lancaster flew at 900 m altitude, releasing bundles through a special chute at 4-second intervals, one every 75 m of flight path. As the aircraft completed each circuit and began the next, it had advanced 6.5 km closer to France. To German radar operators watching continuously, this created the signature of a massive fleet advancing at invasion speed. The window clouds from successive passes would overlap, creating a dense continuous radar return stretching across km of ocean. The Lancasters had to maintain precisely 295 km/h airspeed, fly absolutely accurate rectangular patterns using H2S navigation radar, and hit their release timing within 2 seconds of the calculated mark. Navigation errors of more than 500 m would break the illusion. To make this work required more than mathematics. It required airmanship of the highest order. The Lancaster crews of 617 Squadron, famous for the Damasters raid, spent 3 weeks practicing the patterns over the North Sea. Squadron leader Leonard Sumter, who led one of the formations, later recalled, "We flew with our flight engineer calling out air speeds constantly. 2 knots too fast or too slow, and we'd be out of position." Meanwhile, The wireless operator was shoving window bundles down the chute like a factory worker watching his stopwatch. 4 seconds bundle, 4 seconds. Bundle for 6 hours straight. The physical act of pushing 2,000 bundles weighing 400 kg total through a narrow chute at precise intervals, whilst flying a precise pattern in darkness over enemy territory, transformed a clever scientific idea into a grueling operational reality. The window bundles froze solid at altitude. Crew members wore thick gloves and still ended the mission with bleeding hands from handling metallized paper in sub-zero temperatures. At 2:30 hours on D-Day morning, the German 15th Army radar station at Cap d'Antifer, 15 km north of La Haye, detected what appeared to be a major fleet formation 35 km offshore. The contact measured approximately 16 km wide and appeared to comprise vessels of significant tonnage based on the strength of returns. The formation was advancing at 12 to 14 km/h on a bearing of 178 degrees directly towards Boulogne. Lieutenant Helmut Murr, the watch officer, immediately telephoned through to Heer's Grouper B headquarters. The plot thickened at 3:00 a.m. when a second formation equally large appeared on screens further east heading towards Cap d'Antifer itself. This was Operation Taxable, the southern component flown by 617 Squadron's counterparts in 218 Squadron. Both Phantom fleets advanced with mechanical precision for the next 3 hours. The German response demonstrated that the deception was working perfectly, perhaps too perfectly. Admiral Theodor Krank, commanding Naval Group West, ordered 6 U-boats from Boulogne to intercept the northern formation, and 5 more from La Haye to engage the southern one. These high-speed attack craft, each armed with 253 cm torpedoes, raced out into the channel at 38 knots, fully expecting to encounter the vanguard of an invasion fleet. Covet and Captain Heinrich Hoffmann, commanding the Ballon Flotilla, later stated in his interrogation report, "We proceeded at full speed to contact position. Radar returns showed multiple large contacts. We arrived at calculated intercept coordinates at 450. There was nothing there. Absolutely nothing. No ships, no debris, only empty water and some wireless interference. The U-boats circled the area for 40 minutes, their own radar sets showing strong returns that seemed to be all around them, yet their lookout saw only darkness and waves. Hoffmann ordered his boats to proceed further north. Assuming the invasion fleet had been faster than estimated, they found nothing. Meanwhile, the actual invasion fleet was landing at Normandy. The Kriegsmarine records show that 12 U-boats and 4 U-boat U-218, U-621, U-953, and U-984 spent the critical hours between 300 and 0:37:00 on the 6th of June chasing radar ghosts towards Pala, whilst the real armada approached Gold, Juno, Sword, Utah, and Omaha, beaches 250 km to the southwest. What made this particularly devastating was that German commanders couldn't simply dismiss the particle contacts as false. The radar signatures were perfect, too perfect to be accidental interference. The formations maintained coherent movement, proper speeds, and appropriate density. At 5:30, when the U-boat reported finding nothing, German naval intelligence concluded that the fleet had been real, but had turned back, possibly a feint or a cancelled operation. This interpretation was exactly what British planners had hoped for. Hitler himself briefed at 6:30 about both the Normandy landings, and the Pas-de-Calais radar contacts concluded that Normandy was the diversion and Pas-de-Calais the real invasion. He refused to release panzer reserves from the 15th Army area until 14th June, 8 days after D-Day, by which time 326,000 Allied troops had consolidated the beachhead. The after-action reports reveal the full scale of German confusion. The 15th Army maintained full alert status throughout 6th of June and 7th June, keeping 19 divisions in position to repel an invasion at Pas-de-Calais that never came. General Ober Hans von Salmuth, commanding the 15th Army, wrote on 7th June, "The radar contacts of 6th June remain unexplained. All evidence suggests a major fleet operation occurred, yet no physical contact was made. Either British countermeasures have reached a sophistication we did not anticipate, or they possess the ability to withdraw entire fleets invisibly. German naval headquarters in Paris compiled a report on 10th of June listing 24 separate incidents of U-boat and surface craft detecting large fleet formations on radar that vanished upon investigation. They concluded correctly that the British had developed an effective method of creating false radar targets, but couldn't determine the mechanism or, crucially, couldn't determine which radar contacts were real and which were phantom. Operation Glimmer didn't work in isolation. It formed the centerpiece of an interlocking system of deceptions that exploited every German intelligence gathering capability. Whilst the Lancasters created phantom fleets on radar, 16 small boats from the Royal Navy's coastal forces supplemented the illusion at sea level. These vessels, motor launches and gunboats, sailed parallel to the bomber patterns, towing 9m-long balloons equipped with radar reflectors. Each balloon reflector assembly, designated the Type 91 naval decoy, produced a radar signature equivalent to a 3,000-ton vessel. The boats maintained wireless silence, but occasionally transmitted brief, encoded messages using the call signs of actual landing ship tank LSD vessels known to German signals intelligence. The boats also fired star shells and deployed smoke floats, creating visual evidence of a fleet that sailors on Ebot could glimpse briefly through darkness and haze, without getting close enough to realize they were seeing balloons and flares rather than destroyers and landing craft. The deception extended into the electromagnetic spectrum in ways German intelligence never fully unraveled. RAF Bomber Command flew diversionary raids against Luftwaffe airfields in the Pas-de-Calais region, precisely timed to coincide with the Phantom Fleet approach, suggesting the fleet had brought its own air cover. Simultaneously, British signals intelligence units in Kent transmitted hours of fake wireless traffic, mimicking the radio chatter of an invasion fleet. Course changes, formation adjustments, anti-submarine alerts, and weather reports. These transmissions used proper naval codes and call signs taken from genuine intercepts of previous convoy operations. German listening post recorded 38 hours of this traffic between the 5th and 7th of June. Signals intelligence analysts in Paris identified 17 different Allied vessels from their transmission patterns, including 3 destroyers, 12 landing ships, and 2 headquarters vessels. None of these ships were near Pas-de-Calais. Most were either in Portsmouth Harbor or approaching Normandy. What critics of the operation had never understood was that it wasn't enough to fool radar. You had to fool the entire German intelligence operator simultaneously, because each system would check the others. Radar operators who saw massive contacts would look for radio traffic from those ships. Signals intelligence units intercepting radio traffic would check radar for confirmation. Naval observers would look for visual evidence of what radar and signals intelligence reported. Only by coordinating deception across all channels could you create something convincing enough to divert an entire army. The London controlling section spent 3 months rehearsing the timing. The window dropping patterns had to coincide precisely with the wireless transmissions, which had to align with the visual displays from the decoy boats, which had to match the timing of the diversionary bombing raids. A single misalignment window dropped, whilst wireless traffic suggested the fleet was still further north, or visual pyrotechnics launched before radar showed contacts would expose the deception. The technical synchronization required innovations that became standard practice in electronic warfare. Each Lancaster carried a wireless receiver tuned to a BBC frequency that transmitted time signals synchronized to Greenwich Mean Time within 0.1 seconds. The window droppers in each aircraft used these signals to coordinate their 4-second release intervals, ensuring that bundles from multiple aircraft hit the water in patterns that created coherent radar returns rather than random clutter. The decoy boats received the same time signals, and used them to coordinate their movements with the bomber patterns above. The wireless deception units in Kent worked from minute-by-minute scripts prepared weeks in advance, specifying exactly when to transmit which messages to create the impression of a fleet progressing through a coordinated invasion plan. This wasn't accidental. British intelligence, through ultra-decrypts and interrogations of captured German officers, understood precisely how German decision-making worked. The Wehrmacht placed enormous faith in technology, particularly in radar, because German engineering culture valued quantifiable technical data over human intelligence. A report from a spy or a resistance fighter might be dismissed as unreliable, but radar contacts were treated as objective facts. British planners exploited this cultural bias ruthlessly. They knew that if they could make their deception appear on German radar screens, German commanders would believe it more readily than they'd believe eyewitness reports contradicting the radar data. The principle went deeper than mere technical trickery. German military doctrine in 1944 was shaped by their experience of Allied capabilities. The British and Americans had demonstrated the ability to assemble enormous fleets. The Sicily invasion in July 1943 had involved 25 90 vessels, the largest amphibious operation to date before D-Day itself. German intelligence knew the Allies were building up forces in southern England for a cross-channel attack. The question wasn't if an invasion would come, but where and when. Pas-de-Calais made logical sense. Shortest sea crossing, direct route to the Ruhr industrial region, better port facilities than Normandy. When German radar showed a massive fleet heading towards Pas-de-Calais on the 6th of June, it confirmed exactly what they expected to see. The deception worked because it told the Germans a story they already believed. What made this work wasn't any single technical feature, but rather a sophisticated understanding of how technology shapes perception. Dr. Reginald Jones, head of scientific intelligence at the Air Ministry, explained in a 1946 lecture, "We didn't fool German radar. We understood that radar operators don't watch screens in isolation. They interpret what they see through a framework of expectations. Present them with data that matches their expectations, and they'll construct a narrative explaining that data in ways that confirm what they already believe. The window created the data. German expectations created the Phantom Fleet. This insight that technological deception succeeds by exploiting human psychology rather than technical limitations became foundational to electronic warfare. The German post-war analyses revealed how completely this psychological dimension dominated their response. Vice Admiral Friedrich Ruger, RML's naval advisor, wrote in his memoirs, "The radar contacts on the 6th of June appeared credible because every other indicator suggested an invasion was imminent. The wireless traffic, the air activity, the weather conditions, all pointed to an invasion. When radar confirmed it, we never questioned whether radar might be deceived. Our technical services had told us radar couldn't be fooled by simple countermeasures. We trusted our technology more than we trusted our own eyes." This confession highlighted the central paradox. The more sophisticated German technology became, the more dependent German commanders became on technical intelligence, and therefore the more vulnerable they became to technical deception. Operation Glimmer established principles that defined electronic warfare for the next 80 years. The concept of creating false targets through electronic means became standard doctrine. During the Cold War, Soviet and NATO forces developed increasingly sophisticated variations on the window concept. From corner reflectors towed behind aircraft to create false bomber formations, to electronic jammers that could generate phantom squadrons on radar screens, modern stealth aircraft use exactly the opposite principle, reducing radar returns rather than amplifying them. But the fundamental insight remains identical. Radar shows what radar can detect, not necessarily what's actually there. The mathematical precision required for Operation Glimmer became the template for drone warfare and autonomous systems decades later. The ability to coordinate multiple platforms, aircraft, boats, and transmitters to create a coherent deception, required the kind of precise timing and navigation that would later enable GPS-guided weapons and coordinated drone swarms. The lessons learned about synchronization, timing, and pattern generation in 1944 directly influenced the development of precision-guided munitions in the 1970s and network C-centric warfare in the 1990s. Wing Commander Dickey's oval flight patterns, calculated to create the illusion of horizontal movement from vertically falling objects, represented an early form of synthetic aperture radar, generating a virtual antenna through the movement of a real one that wouldn't be fully developed until the 1960s. The operation also demonstrated that low-technology solutions properly applied could defeat high-technology systems. The total cost of Operation Glimmer, including aircraft fuel, window production, and crew training, came to approximately £47,000 in 1944, roughly $2.3 million today. This defeated a radar network that had cost Germany over £500 million and diverted forces worth billions. The cost-exchange ratio became a foundational principle in electronic warfare. Relatively inexpensive countermeasures can neutralize extraordinarily expensive detection systems if you understand the physics and psychology properly. Modern military forces still exploit this asymmetry. From cheap GPS jammers disrupting precision weapons to simple reflectors creating false targets for radar-guided missiles, the human dimension remained crucial throughout. The Lancaster crews who flew Operation Glimmer maintained their patterns despite German night fighters, attempting to intercept them despite anti-aircraft fire from coastal batteries, and despite the physical exhaustion of 6 hours of precision flying whilst manhandling window bundles in freezing conditions. Flight Sergeant Ronald Clark, a wireless operator on one of the Glimmer aircraft, recorded in his diary, "We flew the same rectangular pattern for 6 hours straight. My hands were bleeding from the metallized paper. The navigator kept saying, 2 degrees left, steady now, 2 degrees right for the entire mission." The flight engineer never stopped calling air speeds. "We knew if we buggered it up, lads would die on beaches, so we didn't bugger it up." This combination of technical precision and human endurance transformed a scientific concept into an operational success. Battlefields aren't laboratories, and combat doesn't occur in conditions that favor perfect technical solutions. Operation Glimmer succeeded because British planners understood that in war, perception matters as much as reality. You don't need to actually have a fleet if you can convince the enemy a fleet exists. You don't need to defeat German radar if you can make German radar defeat itself by showing operators what they expect to see. The more sophisticated and comprehensive German intelligence systems became, the more completely they could be subverted by showing them coordinated false information across multiple channels. The deeper principle was this: technology provides data, but humans interpret data through expectations. German radar was working perfectly on the 6th of June 1944. It detected the window exactly as it should. The floor wasn't in the radar. It was in the doctrine that treated radar contacts as infallible facts rather than as data requiring interpretation. British deception operations succeeded because they understood this distinction. They created data that looked legitimate to German systems and made sense within German expectations. Knowing that German commanders would construct their own convincing narrative explaining that data, modern military forces still struggle with this lesson. Advanced surveillance systems provide overwhelming amounts of data, but adversaries can exploit the psychological dimensions of how analysts interpret that data. The principle established by Operation Glimmer remains relevant. In the competition between detection and deception, understanding human decision as much as understanding technology. You can have the finest radar in the world, but if someone understands how you'll interpret what that radar shows you, they can make you see phantom fleets sailing towards empty beaches whilst the real invasion lands elsewhere. On the 6th of June 1944, 18 Lancaster bombers dropping 47,000 worth of aluminium strips convinced the German 15th Army that an invasion fleet was approaching Pas-de-Calais, keeping 19 divisions out of the Normandy battle for more than a week. They did this not through superior technology, but through superior understanding of how technology shapes decisions. The Phantom Fleet was real enough. It existed on every German radar screen, in every signal intelligence report, in every visual sighting by U-boat crews. It simply existed in the Germans' perception rather than in physical reality. In war, that was sufficient. The Germans didn't bomb empty water because they were foolish. They bombed empty water because British scientists and air crew had made empty water look exactly like what German intelligence systems expected an invasion fleet to look like. That they succeeded so completely at such negligible cost, using such simple technology, remains perhaps the most elegant demonstration of deception's power in the history of warfare. Yeah,